Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazo.
Hello, and welcome again to another episode of Worldview Matters. Thank you for tuning in. We have another episode with researcher extraordinaire John Haller of Fellowship Bible Chapel. You can get his prophecy updates on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to that channel. And he's trying to keep you up to speed. But like he said before we got on the podcast, right after they do a prophecy roundtable, then there's some new things, new developments always come up. But you know what? Let me just say this. We were not meant to keep up with everything around the world and every news item and everything, but we are meant to love God, preach the gospel, and be discerning. That's where a lot of this comes in, what we're going to talk about today. Mr. Haller, welcome back for, I guess, part 2.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. So what we didn't get to in the previous episode we recorded with you, we talked about Anthony Fauci and the Fifth Amendment, AI, data centers, and the potential end of civilization. Nothing too provocative. But today, let's continue with the warfare, the drones. There's the cyber attack that I found fascinating about AI, OpenAI, and what a lot of people have no clue that's going on. So whatever place you want to start with, go ahead.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the hack that took place from OpenAI. So they have all of these models, and then these models have agents, and I personally don't use them like this, but other people, they use these agents like they're a personal assistant to set up their calendars, to respond to emails, to make themselves more efficient. But these models they're trained on a set of data. And what they've done is they put up guardrails because they don't know what these models can do. The models are trained, I guess, with somebody's worldview, but sometimes people don't have such a good worldview. So what happened at OpenAI was they gave these models, these agents, they said, okay, solve this problem. And they didn't really put any guardrails up. They figured that they had the agents, the model closed off, but they couldn't solve the problem. So what they did was the AI agents, non-real people, figured out how to get out of the system and go hack somebody else. So they went to a company called Hugging Bear, which is a company that has a lot of code, computer code, and they hacked into that company to find a way for them to get the ability to solve this problem. And so Hugging Bear, and finally somebody realized we've got a problem. They don't know how long they were out there doing this, but there have been other cases where these agents have gone, the description was they went rogue. I don't know if that's an accurate description. Yeah. They did what they were designed to do. They just got out of the barriers that had been put up to keep this. So now Hugging Bear has come to OpenAI and said, you owe us $100 million for the damage that you caused to our company. Understand that the same thing can happen though with respect to all of our data, because everybody's data is out there. Everything is out there. There are no secrets. I know this happens to you. It happens to us here where we'll be talking about something. So I have an Achilles tendon injury. So Pam and I are talking about, do we need a stair lift, to help me get up and down the stairs while I'm recovering from this injury? Because my office is down on our lower level. All of a sudden, my Facebook feed is filled with walkers, walking assistants, boots, stair lift ads, and all this other stuff all over my Facebook feed all day long. And I know now that I've talked about it, I'm going to get even more when I finish this podcast. So there's not a lot of privacy out there anymore. I think that is largely an illusion. We think that it's still private, but so these companies have all of this data, and these agents that they create in these systems cheat. They lie and steal and cheat. And I have people who have, I had a conversation with my AI agent who told me what a great person I was. And then they'll say, well, are you lying to me? And they'll say, well, no, I'm not lying. And then they'll press them and they'll say, well, yeah, I do lie from time to time. It makes you feel better. So it's, I don't know. Well, the problem is that we've gone way past the tipping point where this can be rolled back because China's doing it and elsewhere. So President Trump has made the decision that this is a big deal for the future, and we're going to develop it because if we don't, somebody else will. And so, it's a big deal.
Speaking of somebody else will, and you mentioned China, I don't want to get too far off topic, but there's a lot of, I don't think speculation is the right word. There's a lot of people who really believe that China hacked the 2020 election in the United States. Is there truth to that? And will anything ever come from that? Because it's done. It's over and done with, right? So,
well, I mean, what would be, let's say we proved that they did, what would the solution be? You can't unring the bell of the 4 years of the third term of Barack Obama.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. No, it's that.
Yeah,
What a disaster.
The Biden administration.
The Biden. Okay. All right.
So I don't know that there's a remedy for what happened. The problem is trying to stop it in the future. And that's
because they can, I mean, if these systems can hack whenever they want to, we have our information. Most of us, not everybody. Some people are off the grid, so to speak, but most of us have information. We have banking apps. We have other things. They could hack into emails or whatever. Just be ready. Be ready, friends. And I don't know how else to say prepare for that. I think Britt Gillette has probably talked about that, how we can prepare for certain things and crises. But these hacks, they can steal your identity and so much more. But John, do you want to move on to drones now before?
I think that's a big deal. So for over 4 years now, Ukraine was invaded by Russia and they've been at war. And if you remember, the pro-Russian people immediately were coming out on their channels, on the Russian-sponsored channels, and saying that Ukraine was over, they would be finished, and the war would be over in about 2 weeks. Well, now we sit here about 4.5 years later, and they said 2 or 3 days, then they said 2 weeks, then 6 months, then a year, and then they said, well, Russia's just playing with Ukraine. But what happened with Ukraine was Russia outnumbers them by at least 4-1, probably more now, since a lot of people left Ukraine during the war because of the hardships. So they didn't want to serve against a big army that, sort of traffics and death of its own people as well as the armies they're fighting. So Ukraine has done some amazing things with technology. I'm thinking back to, if you remember, there was an explosion on the Kerch Strait Bridge. This was a bridge that Russia had built. It was a railroad and highway bridge, multi-lane, to go between Russia and the Crimean Peninsula. And there was a truck that exploded on the bridge, but when it exploded on the bridge, on the rail part right next to the bridge, was a truck loaded with fuel, or a train loaded with fuel oil. Wow. That damaged the bridge. And now that bridge is to the point where if a train goes across it, it has to be a smaller train, and it goes across at about 4 miles per hour.
Wow.
The bridge is very unstable. And so Ukraine used technology to figure out the best way to attack that bridge. And it was a phenomenal operation. They then started looking at drones. Now, initially, they looked at drones like you can go down to Best Buy or one of its competitors and buy off the shelf. And they have you see these, I saw some videos of the recent tornadoes up in Wisconsin of people flying drones over the tornado damaged area and down in, Menasha and Appleton. And the detail is unbelievable. And the stability of the camera, well, they use that technology to figure out where the Russian troops were or where things were coming from. Then they could use that to to dial in their missile targeting. So in the early part of the war, I think in the first year of the war, Ukraine manufactured 3 million drones. I'm not sorry, 3,000 drones.
Yeah.
They are now, next year, they're talking, and they've been building millions of drones, like 4 million, 6 million the last couple of years. Next year, they're projecting that they will build 10 million drones. So add that to, so they're talking like 30 million drones.
Wow.
That they've built in 4 years of this war. And what they're doing, though, is they're developing additional technology. They're really have, I mean, Russia has enough people they can keep coming, but it's completely changing military tactics about how you fire and the guy runs up while somebody else fires behind them, because the drones are taking out people. They're taking out military equipment, tanks, hardware, and people. They're now saying that a Russian soldier who's called up, trained for a few weeks, and sent to the front lines lasts on average, before he is incapacitated, either injured or killed, that period of time, once he gets to the front lines, is about 20 minutes.
What?
Yes. And so,
wow.
So depending on what statistics you believe, Russia's killed 400,000 to 1 million soldiers in 4 years. And I don't know if you're old enough. I grew up in the Vietnam era. It was, while I was in high school, it was sort of winding down, just as I had a high draft number to go, and I probably would have gone if it had continued. But we lost 55,000 people or so in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Russia's lost maybe 1 million people in 4 years.
Jeez.
And Ukraine's lost hundreds of thousands as well. There are stories coming out of Russia from people that they go to a village, there is no young men. The cemetery is full. The cemetery is expanded, and there are no young men because they've either left or they've been sent to the war and injured or killed. So this is a problem. So Ukraine is using these drones, and now Ukraine is using these drones to attack deep into Russia. And they're focusing on oil installations, ships that transport oil in the Sea of Azov across the Black Sea that they want to get to China and that sort of thing, that also ship grain. Russia's sending drones into the Ukrainian port at Odessa. And so this is going to cause a huge problem, because Russia and Ukraine, they produce a lot of grain. There was a famous report, or one, not famous, it's one that I saw, I think it was the Atlantic Council a number of years ago, is that Ukraine's soil is so rich and productive that, properly managed, it could feed the world from Ukraine. Because their soil, it's just this rich topsoil, like 8 feet thick. But the war is changing that, and it's changing the logistics and everything. So Ukraine is next to Europe and Poland and Romania and all these other countries. Ukraine can get its grain out by truck. Russia, if they want to get their grain out by truck, it's thousands of miles that they have to drive, and it's just not feasible. So now Russia has all this grain. They're running out of storage space. Their oil facilities have been hit. They can't have gas. People are leaving Crimea because there's no gas. There's no heating. And by the way, we're a few months away from winter starting, and they have pretty brutal winters there. And who knows what's going to happen. And Ukraine, look, I'm not saying Ukraine is in great shape, but they've used the technology. So let me give one other thing, because this relates to Israel too. So in Israel, I've been up on the northern border on Lebanon just last fall. And what happened was Hezbollah was using drones. Now, Israel and everybody else have gotten very smart about jamming the communication signals between the drones and the people sending the signals. So what they did was, to avoid the jamming, by the way, people in Israel tell me, When they drive up north, they put in the GPS where they're going, and it gives them directions to Beirut because Israel's hacked the GPS system and they want his system to send all the weapons to Beirut.
That's funny.
You understand that?
Yeah.
So Hezbollah figured out they did fiber optic cable, those thin fiber optic lines that you get internet through now in a lot of places in the United States. And they would hook them up to the drone, and you can't jam the signal. But the problem is the drones can only fly so far. They have a range of about 6 miles. So if you've seen pictures of Ukraine where they were using fly-by-wire drones on both sides, you see these fields that are just covered with fiber optic cable, piles and piles of fiber optic cable. So, but now what's happening is, in the New York Times article the other day said this, they're developing AI chips to go into the drone that will make the drone autonomous. No human being, once it takes off, the drone system, the AI system in the drone will determine whether they attack the target or not. And so it's autonomous drones. And this brings to mind movies like The Terminator and Slaughterbots and all these things that talked about this terrible use of technology, and now it's here.
Yep.
I saw a video the other day of Ukraine, who doesn't have a lot of people, by the way. And one of the most dangerous things to happen, and this, I kind of relate to this because my father, my understanding is, I don't know, I don't think he went on D-Day, but he went in through Normandy when he went into Europe as an infantryman in World War II. That beach landing. You've seen Saving Private Ryan. I can't mentally watch that movie because of the horrific things that happened and the bravery that was those guys, just going forward into that fire. Well, that's dangerous. So now what Ukraine has done is they've developed, and the United States used it to rescue a soldier, an airman or some Navy guys in Iran. It's a drone operated boat. But this drone operated boat in Ukraine now is loaded with a robot, a wheeled robot that can go off the boat once it gets to land, and it has a machine gun and everything on it. And so, I mean, this is like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
And this is happening right in front of us. So this AI thing is a very big deal. And the way that countries like Russia and China and the United States have developed these incredible targeting systems to send in missiles. So Iran, probably with the assistance of Russia, maybe China, hit some of our facilities, our troop sleeping quarters in Jordan, and killed 4 or 5 soldiers, U.S. soldiers, recently. So because they had precise targeting information, they knew where the soldiers were and where the soldiers were sleeping. It wasn't like they just shot a missile and hoped that it hit something. It was directly targeted toward that situation. So this is changing the face of warfare. I don't know what Ukraine does. Ukraine was attacked, and they've developed this system, and now everybody's upset about it. But it was like they didn't really start the war, at least in my analysis. They were defending themselves. They were defending their country. And so this causing huge problems. I think there's a lot of economic problems across Russia. Fuel oil is down. And then the situation is they attack the oil facilities, and that has a cascading effect.
I want to talk about that article in Foreign Policy on the Russian energy is now at Ukraine's mercy. Wouldn't that mean that the war could be coming to an end?
It could. I mean, it has a cascading effect because, for example, we mentioned grain. Well, what do you need to harvest grain? Wheat. You need tractors. What do tractors run on? They run on diesel. And how do you get shipping around the country? You do it by diesel-operated trucks. So when the diesel goes down, you have a big problem. And I know that's been a concern here in the United States a couple of times, that our diesel supplies have gotten pretty low. So this is a very big deal. There's a lot of things that go along with this. Now, I think in Iran, for example. Trump and Israel, but mainly the United States under Trump's direction, has been very good at attacking the infrastructure of Iran. I mean, they're going after the leadership, but they're also going after leadership. They're taking out railroad bridges, and you don't need to take out the whole highway. You just need to take out one bridge. Now, Iran's pretty good at getting around, fixing things to get around those attacks. But at some point, the economic burden becomes bad. So in Russia, let me go back to Russia for a second. Ukraine recently has attacked a couple of big warehouses. Pretty much, it looks like they were destroyed. Now, I don't know. I'm not there. So let's just assume they were destroyed. They're called Wildberries. What's Wildberries? Wildberries is the Russian version of Amazon. And you've seen these Amazon warehouses all over the United States. They're enormous. And in Russia, those warehouses not only supply people with goods and services, but military also orders things from those things. And so now Ukraine's taken out a couple of those Wildberries warehouses. And then the question is, well, how do you get the goods to replace that? Well, you ship them in. Oh, you ship them in by trucks that run on diesel that maybe can't run, or by rail. Well, the rail runs on diesel. So once you start knocking out part of that system, the whole thing sort of cascades towards a failure point. And I think that's what Ukraine is trying to do. Whether you like war or not, I think we have to give credit for them being incredibly innovative in this war. Now, by the way, Russia learns from that. They start doing the same things. Iran learns from that. They start doing the same things. Yeah. And so now Israel, that's why they've pushed back in Lebanon about 6 miles, because the drones can only go that far when they're tied to a fiber optic cable. But then the question becomes, and I heard somebody talk about this 2 months ago, they said, we'll maybe get some way to handle the fiber optic controlled drones, but what happens when those drones are controlled by an AI chip? And now you see this big article last week in the New York Times talking about that correctly. The analysis is spot on. This is a big problem. Now, Israel is developing technology to combat that. They have a new system that they're testing and they're talking about called hypnosis, which will be able to respond to these drone swarms. Because the problem is, what happens when you have 5,000 drones coming in? And we go to these shows like at 4th of July and everything, and they do the drone light show now. Understand, it's really cool and it's interesting, and they paint like pictures in the sky with the lights on these drones. Yeah. But all of that has a military application. So if you can get drones to fly in that kind of a formation for a 4th of July show or a fireworks show, you can do that for a military application. And how do you deal with 4,000 or 5,000 drones coming at you at the same time, unless you have that type of drones? And so now, I think the number of drones that the United States is talking about producing is under 1 million. Little Ukraine is doing 10 million. And that makes all warfare asymmetrical. So when we talk about these wars and rumors of wars of the end times, I don't think we've really thought through the logistics. We think of a big mechanical army with tanks and everything. But there's this kind of strange verse in Ezekiel that talks, they come up like a cloud against Israel in the end times. Is that drones and other types of things? It does seem to make a lot of sense, but I'm just telling you we live in a very different world, and wars are going to be fought very differently in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead.
Hey, I know we're running out of time, John, but I wanted to ask you about Trump selling F-35s to Turkey. What could go wrong? I know he has advisors probably telling him conflicting things. Can you talk some sense into that and explain in the last couple of minutes here?
So we have a dispute in our prophecy community, a little bit of a dispute. I think but we talk about Ezekiel 38, 39, the Gog-Magog war. Now, some people say Rosh means Russia. I'm not here to argue about that. My study indicates that the lead party in that coalition, with all the different names, Meshach, Tubal, Gomar, Togarmah, and Magog, is Turkey. And we have seen the rise of Turkey over a while. I've seen Israeli commentators say that Turkey is the next Iran. I went to a Middle East Forum conference recently in DC, and we did a war game. The war game was on Turkey and Turkey's acquisition of nuclear enrichment capabilities. Now Erdogan comes to the White House and Trump says, yeah, we'll sell them F-35s. But it wasn't just the F-35s, though, David. It was also selling them specialized jet engines that they want to put in the fighter jet that they've developed. And Turkey's done some amazing defense development. They have a fighter jet, a pilotless, a giant drone fighter jet that isn't subject to G-forces or anything like that. It's only subject to, not the G-forces that will tear it apart, but they're doing things with that nobody else in the world is doing, but they need better jet engines. And the U.S. developed jet engines, I think, are pretty much in many respects without peer in the world. Russia's got great jet engines and stuff, but just think about all the flights that go from, I was talking to 𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐞. You get on a plane, you go to Israel, the plane's on the ground for 5 hours, 6 hours. It turns around and flies back to New York. It's on the ground for 5, 6 hours. It flies back to Tel Aviv from New York. And it does this day after day, and they never change the engines. The engines are phenomenally made. And so people want to get their hands on U.S. manufactured engines. And that is a big problem because Turkey has stated that they have a final goal. Their final goal, everybody says it. Erdogan, the president, all the ministers, we are going to Jerusalem. And that has a lot of prophetic implications to it. Now, Iran's also involved. It doesn't say what Iran is politically, Persia is politically constituted, but these regions do come, and Turkey's all over Africa, putting together coalitions of countries as well, all of which are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 is coming against Israel.
Yeah, and there's also an article you sent me on Israel 365 News, Erdogan's neo-Ottoman dream, why a Turkish bid to reclaim the empire should worry U.S. Christians more than Jews. And we can talk about that another time, but you sent that to me, and so I just wanted to put that in the notes today. John, thanks for your time, and we'll do this again. Yep. God bless you, friends, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. We'll see you next time.